The morning sun cast long shadows across the Terran quarter of Station Nexus 7, where the smell of coffee and fresh bread drifted from human-owned shops. 8-year-old Maya clutched her father's hand as they walked toward the medical bay, her small backpack bouncing with each step. The quarterly health check was routine, but for a child who had never left the station, even a short journey through the alien sections felt like an adventure. Commander David of the Terran Defense Corps smiled down at his daughter. "Remember what we talked about, sweetheart. Some of the aliens might look scary, but they're just different." Maya nodded eagerly, her dark eyes wide with curiosity. She had seen traders with their chitinous exoskeletons and heard the musical calls of the bird-like. But the medical bay was in the neutral zone where species from across the galaxy mingled. The station's central hub buzzed with activity. Holographic advertisements flickered in dozens of languages, while beings of various shapes and sizes conducted business. Maya pressed closer to her father as a group of towering warriors marched past, their gray skin from countless battles, plasma rifles slung across their backs. "They're so big," Maya whispered. "Size doesn't make someone important," David replied, squeezing her hand. "What matters is how they treat others." Near the medical bay entrance, they encountered a security checkpoint manned by hegemony forces. The Galactic Hegemony maintained order on neutral stations, and their officers came from member species across known space. Today, an officer named operated the scanner, his 4 arms moving with mechanical precision as he processed each visitor. His compound eyes focused on the human pair. At 8 feet tall with an exoskeleton that gleamed like black metal, he cut an imposing figure. His mandibles clicked with irritation as he reviewed their identification cards. "Purpose of visit?" His voice came out as a harsh rasp through his translation device. "Medical appointment for my daughter," David responded calmly, presenting their documentation. The officer's antennae twitched as he scanned the papers. His species had joined the hegemony only recently, and many still harbored resentment toward humans. The Terran border war had ended just 5 years ago with a decisive human victory, and the peace treaty remained a sore point for many military officers. Muttered under his breath, using the derogatory term many aliens applied to humans, Earth's classification as a Class 12, a planet so dangerous that most galactic species couldn't survive there, had become both humanity's strength and their stigma. Maya tilted her head, not understanding the word but sensing the hostility in the alien's tone. "Daddy, what's up?" David's jaw tightened slightly, but he kept his voice level. "Someone who comes from a very tough planet, sweetheart." His mandibles spread in what might have been amusement. "Tough, your species breeds violence, you bring chaos wherever you go." He leaned down toward Maya, his massive form casting a shadow over the small girl. "This one will grow up to be just like the rest, destructive and primitive." "Officer, please just process our documents," David said, his military training keeping his temper in check despite the insult to his daughter. But was just getting started. The recent loss of 3 colonies to human expansion had left him bitter, and seeing a human child only reminded him of humanity's rapid spread across what he considered space. "You humans think you own the galaxy now," he continued, his 4 hands gesturing aggressively. "Breeding like parasites, claiming worlds that belong to civilized species." Maya stepped back, frightened by the alien's aggressive posture. In her movement, her backpack caught on the corner of the security console, and she stumbled slightly. What happened next occurred in slow motion. Already agitated and viewing the child's movement as somehow threatening, reacted with the reflexive aggression of a trained soldier. His primary right arm swung out in a backhand motion, striking Maya across the face with enough force to send her tiny body flying. The 8-year-old girl hit the deck plating hard, her lips split and bleeding, tears streaming down her face as she cried out in pain and fear. Her backpack spilled open, scattering crayons and a small stuffed elephant across the floor. The security area fell silent. Every being within 50 meters stopped what they were doing and stared at the scene. A hegemony officer had just struck a human child. David dropped to his knees beside his daughter, gathering her into his arms as she sobbed into his shoulder. Blood stained her yellow dress, the one she had chosen specially for their outing because it had pictures of spaceships on it. "Maya, sweetheart, are you okay?" His hands shook as he checked for injuries, his mind racing between parental panic and military assessment. The blow could have killed her if it used full strength. Around them, other beings began to murmur. A trader approached hesitantly, her feathered form trembling with distress. "Sir, I witnessed what happened. That officer attacked your child without provocation." An elderly Terran businessman stepped forward, his face pale with shock. "I recorded it on the whole thing." Seemed to realize what he had done, but instead of showing remorse, he doubled down. "The primitive knocked into official equipment. I was maintaining order." David looked up from his daughter, and those who knew humans recognized something dangerous in his eyes. When humans were pushed too far, when their families were threatened, they became something else entirely. Something that had earned them their fearsome reputation across the galaxy. "You struck my daughter," he said quietly, his voice carrying the deadly calm that preceded a storm. "Your spawn needs to learn respect," replied, but his antennae were already twitching nervously. Something in the human's posture had changed, and every instinct the possessed was suddenly screaming warnings. David gently passed Maya to the trader, who accepted the child with gentle wing arms. "Please keep her safe," he said simply. Then Commander David of the Terran Defense Corps stood up, and the temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. "Officer," he said, reading the alien's nameplate, "you have just made a very serious mistake." The puffed up his exoskeleton, trying to appear more intimidating. "Are you threatening a hegemony officer, human?" "No," David replied, pulling out his communication device. "I'm calling my wife." Those familiar with human military structure understood the significance. In the TDC, married couples often served together, and Maya wasn't just any officer's daughter. The call connected, and a woman's voice came through clearly. "David, how did Maya's appointment go?" "Sarah," David said, never taking his eyes off, "a hegemony officer just struck our daughter in the face. She's injured and bleeding." The silence that followed lasted exactly 3 heartbeats. Then Admiral Sarah, commanding officer of the Terran Fifth Fleet currently on patrol near Station Nexus 7, spoke in a voice that could have frozen nitrogen. "Repeat that." A security officer named struck Maya across the face without provocation. "She's 8 years old, Sarah." What happened next would be talked about in military academies across the galaxy for generations to come. Through the open comm channel, everyone in the security area could hear Admiral's response. "All ships, this is Admiral, code Crimson. A member of my family has been attacked by hostile forces on Station Nexus 7, battle stations." The comm channel filled with acknowledgments from 15 Terran warships, including 2 dreadnoughts and a carrier. On every human vessel within 100 light-years, klaxons began to wail. His compound eyes widened as he finally understood what he had done. He hadn't just hit a human child. He had struck the daughter of one of Terra's most decorated military families during a time of increasing galactic tension. Around the security area, beings began to evacuate rapidly. Everyone knew what humans were capable of when their families were threatened. The incident was still fresh in galactic memory. An entire planet had been turned to glass after aliens had taken human children hostage. David knelt back down beside Maya, who was still crying softly in the trader's arms. "It's okay, sweetheart. Mommy's coming and she's bringing friends." Through the station's transparent aluminum viewports, the first human warship was already visible, its angular hull bristling with weapons as it approached at combat speed. The galaxy was about to remember why humans were called, and why their children were never, ever to be harmed. Station Nexus 7's emergency broadcasts began to echo through every speaker. "All non-essential personnel report to emergency shelters immediately. This is not a drill." But for one officer who had let his prejudice overcome his Admiral Sarah stood on the bridge of the TDS Retribution, her knuckles white as she gripped the command rail. Through the main, Station Nexus 7 grew larger by the second, its rotating habitat rings gleaming against the backdrop of stars. Behind her, the Fifth Fleet maintained perfect formation, 15 warships representing the finest vessels in Terra's military arsenal. "Ma'am, we're receiving multiple hails from Station Control," reported Lieutenant Commander Torres from the communications station. "They're demanding we explain our combat approach and reduce speed." "Ignore them," Sarah replied coldly. "Tactical, what's our ETA?" 14 minutes at current velocity, Admiral." 14 minutes. Sarah closed her eyes and tried not to imagine what those minutes meant to her daughter. Maya was tough. She had to be, growing up as a military child. But she was still just 8 years old and someone had hurt her. The bridge crew worked with grim efficiency. They had served under Admiral for 3 years and they knew her reputation. The Iron Lady, some called her, though never to her face. She had earned her rank by being brilliant, ruthless, and absolutely uncompromising when it came to protecting human interests. But today wasn't about politics or military strategy. Today was personal. "Admiral," called the sensor operator, "I'm detecting elevated energy signatures from the station's defensive systems. They're powering weapons." Sarah's laugh held no humor. "Let them." Station Nexus 7 was a marvel of engineering, a neutral trading post that served as a hub for dozens of species. Its defensive capabilities were impressive, enough to hold off pirates or small raiders. Against a full Terran battle fleet, they might as well have been throwing rocks. "Incoming transmission from the station's commanding officer," Tors announced. On screen, the flickered to show administrator, a dignified whose blue-scaled features were tight with concern. Behind him, the station's command center buzzed with activity as beings of various species worked frantically at their stations. "Admiral, I must protest your fleet's approach. Station Nexus 7 is neutral territory under galactic hegemony protection. You cannot bring military vessels here without proper authorization." Sarah stepped forward, and those who knew her recognized the predatory calm in her movements. "Administrator, one of your security officers has assaulted my 8-year-old daughter. I suggest you find him and place him in custody immediately." The gill slits fluttered nervously. "Admiral, I'm sure there's been some misunderstanding. Our security protocols." "There's no misunderstanding," Sarah cut him off. "Officer struck a human child in the face without provocation. The incident was witnessed by multiple beings and recorded. You have approximately 12 minutes to resolve this situation before I do." His throat sac inflated with stress. He was old enough to remember the incident, when human forces had reduced an entire world to radioactive ash after local authorities failed to protect human civilians. "Admiral, please, we must follow proper diplomatic channels. I cannot simply." 12 minutes, Sarah repeated and cut the transmission. On the station, chaos was spreading like wildfire. Word of the incident had reached every corner of Nexus 7, and beings were either fleeing to their ships or barricading themselves in secure areas. The docking bays were packed with vessels desperately trying to undock and escape before the human fleet arrived. In the security station where the incident had occurred, David sat on the floor with Maya in his arms, gently cleaning the blood from her face with a medical wipe. The trader, whose name was Sarah, had stayed to help, her musical voice offering soft comfort to the frightened child. "My mommy's really coming?" Maya asked, her voice small and uncertain. "Yes, sweetheart, mommy's coming with the whole fleet." Had retreated to the far side of the security checkpoint, his 4 hands shaking as he tried to contact his superiors. Around him, other hegemony personnel were backing away, none wanting to be associated with the officer who had just started an interstellar incident. "Base Command, this is Officer. I need immediate evacuation. The humans are coming in force and I—" "Officer," came the cold reply from his commanding officer, "you are hereby relieved of duty pending investigation. Surrender your weapons and report to holding immediately." "Sir, you don't understand. I was maintaining order, the human child." "You struck an 8-year-old girl," the voice cracked with fury. "Do you have any idea what you've done? The Terran 5th Fleet is approaching at combat speed. Admiral has 15 warships and enough firepower to crack this station like an egg." Through the security checkpoint's windows, the first human ship was now visible to the naked eye. The TDS Relentless, a heavy cruiser bristling with plasma cannons and missile ports, took up position above the station's primary docking ring. "All station personnel," came an announcement over the intercom. "This is Administrator. We are experiencing a Code 7 diplomatic emergency. All non-essential personnel should report to secure areas immediately." But in the corridors and common areas of Nexus 7, panic was taking hold. Aliens who had only heard stories about human military capabilities were now seeing it firsthand. The approaching fleet didn't just represent overwhelming firepower, it represented the fury of a species that had earned its fearsome reputation through centuries of conflict. A young merchant named had been browsing in a nearby shop when the incident occurred. Now he pressed against the window of an observation lounge, watching in fascination and terror as more human warships emerged from hyperspace. "I count 12, 13, 14 vessels," he whispered to his companion, a veteran trader who had seen the aftermath of human military action before. 15, the older alien corrected grimly. "That's the flagship coming in now." The TDS Retribution was a sight to behold. At nearly 2 kilometers long, the Dreadnought-class vessel was a monument to human engineering and military doctrine. Its armor plating was from a dozen battles, and its weapon arrays could reduce a small moon to debris. But what truly made it terrifying wasn't its size or firepower, it was what it represented. Humans didn't build ships like this for conquest or glory. They built them to protect their own, and anyone who threatened human families would face the full weight of Terra's military might. On the bridge of the Retribution, Sarah watched the tactical display as her fleet took position around the station. Each ship was exactly where she wanted it, weapons trained on critical systems, Marines ready for deployment. "Admiral," called her tactical officer, "we have target locks on all station defensive systems, power cores, and docking bays. We can disable their entire infrastructure in approximately 90 seconds. "Good, communications. Patch me through to station-wide broadcast." "You're live, Admiral." Sarah's voice echoed through every speaker on Station Nexus 7, carried into every shop, every residence, every corridor where beings cowered in fear. "Citizens of Station Nexus 7, this is Admiral Sarah of the Terran Defense Corps. 8 minutes ago, one of your security officers committed an unprovoked assault on my 8-year-old daughter. This is unacceptable." The station fell silent, except for the hum of life support systems. "I am not here to harm innocent beings," Sarah continued, "but I will have justice for this attack on my child. You have 5 minutes to deliver officer to my custody. If you fail to comply, I will take whatever action I deem necessary to ensure the safety of human civilians on this station." The transmission ended, and the countdown began. In the security checkpoint, stared at David with growing horror. "You can't let them take me. I'm a hegemony officer. There are treaties, protocols." David looked up from his daughter, and his expression was carved from stone. "You should have thought about that before you hit my daughter." 2 hegemony soldiers approached cautiously, their weapons lowered but ready. "Officer, you're under arrest. Please come with us." "No," this exoskeleton clicked with agitation. "I won't be handed over to these like some criminal." "You are a criminal," one of the soldiers replied. "And if we don't hand you over, Admiral will come and take you herself, along with anyone who stands in her way." Through the transparent walls of the checkpoint, they could all see the human fleet in perfect formation, a steel constellation of human determination. Each ship was a promise, a guarantee that no human child would be harmed without consequence. 4 minutes, David said quietly, checking his chronometer. The galaxy was about to learn that there was no force in the universe more dangerous than human parents protecting their young. The countdown timer on every human ship showed 3 minutes and 47 seconds when Administrator made the most difficult decision of his long career. Standing in his command center, surrounded by panicking staff members from a dozen different species, he activated the station-wide communication system one final time. "Admiral, this is Administrator. Officer will be delivered to Docking Bay 7 in 2 minutes. We ask for your restraint and patience as we resolve this matter through proper channels." Sarah's response was immediate and uncompromising. "Administrator, you have 2 minutes and 30 seconds. If officer is not in our custody by then, we will come aboard and collect him ourselves." In the security checkpoint, the reality of the situation finally broke through's denial. 4 hegemony soldiers now surrounded him, their weapons trained on his position. His fellow security officers had backed away, unwilling to risk their lives for someone who had violated every protocol of civilized behavior. "This is insane," he protested, his mandibles clicking rapidly. "I'm a decorated officer. I fought in 3 border campaigns." Captain, the station's head of security, stepped forward. The grizzled Orion veteran had seen enough conflict to recognize when a situation had moved beyond politics and into something far more dangerous. "Officer, you struck a child. Not a combatant, not a threat, an 8-year-old girl. There is no military decoration that justifies that action. David continued to hold Maya, who had finally stopped crying but still clung to her father with small, frightened hands. The medical team that had arrived was treating her injuries: a split lip, bruised cheek, and mild concussion. Nothing life-threatening, but serious enough to require careful monitoring. "Daddy," Maya whispered, "why did that man hit me? I didn't do anything bad." David's heart clenched as he looked down at his daughter's confused, innocent face. How do you explain hatred to a child? How do you tell an 8-year-old that some beings in the galaxy saw her as something less than worthy of basic respect? Sometimes, sweetheart, adults make very bad choices. That's why Mommy and her ships are here, to make sure everyone knows that hurting children is never okay. Through the checkpoint windows, they could see hegemony Marines marching toward the docking bays. The officer was fighting every step of the way, his exoskeleton scraping against the deck plating as the soldiers dragged him forward. Meanwhile, aboard the TDS Retribution, Admiral paced the bridge like a caged predator. Her tactical display showed the station's every system, every weapon, every potential escape route. Her Marines were already suited up and ready for deployment, and her fighter squadrons were armed and prepped for launch. "Admiral," called Lieutenant Commander Torres, "we're receiving messages from 17 different species ambassadors demanding we stand down. They're claiming this is a violation of neutral space protocols." "Tell them," Sarah replied without looking away from her display, "that the safety of human children supersedes their protocols. Any ambassador who wishes to discuss the matter further can take it up with the Terran Senate after we resolve this situation." Commander Jackson, her executive officer and a veteran of the border war, approached carefully. "Admiral, with respect, the political ramifications of this action could be significant. The Hegemony Council will demand explanations, and there are already calls for sanctions against Terra." Sarah turned to face him, and her expression could have melted hull plating. "Commander, are you suggesting I should allow an alien to assault my daughter without consequence because it might be politically inconvenient?" "No, ma'am, I'm simply—" "My daughter is 8 years old. She was going to a medical appointment. She was struck by a hegemony officer for no reason other than the species she was born into. If the galaxy has a problem with my response to that, they can file their complaints with someone who cares." The bridge crew exchanged glances. They had served under Admiral long enough to know that when her family was threatened, she became something beyond military protocol. She became the avatar of every human parent who had ever sworn to protect their children from harm. 1 minute 30 seconds, announced the tactical officer. In Docking Bay 7, a crowd had gathered to witness the unprecedented event. Aliens from across the galaxy pressed against observation windows, watching as the most powerful human fleet in this sector of space prepared to receive a prisoner. The bay doors cycled open with a hiss of equalizing atmosphere, and a Terran assault shuttle descended from the Retribution. The craft was sleek, angular, and designed for rapid deployment of Marines in hostile territory. Its arrival sent a clear message: the humans were not here for diplomacy. As the shuttle touched down, its cargo ramp lowered to reveal 12 Terran Marines in full combat armor. These weren't peacekeepers or diplomats. They were soldiers from Terra's most elite units, beings who had earned their reputation in the bloodiest conflicts the galaxy had ever seen. Their leader, Sergeant Major, stepped forward with the mechanical precision of a man who had conducted similar operations on dozens of worlds. His armor bore the scars of countless battles, and his face was set in an expression of professional coldness. "I am Sergeant Major, Terran Defense Corps Marine Division. I am here to take custody of the individual who assaulted a human child." Was pushed forward by the hegemony soldiers, his exoskeleton now dull with fierce sweat. Face to face with the human Marines, he finally understood the magnitude of his mistake. These weren't the soft civilians he had imagined humans to be. These were predators from beings who had evolved to survive on a planet that would kill most galactic species within minutes. "I demand to speak to my embassy," he protested. "This is a violation of my rights." Looked at him with the kind of dispassionate evaluation a butcher might give a cut of meat. "You forfeited your rights when you struck a human child. You will be transported to the Retribution for processing." "Processing?" His voice cracked. "What does that mean?" "It means, officer," came a new voice, "that you will face justice under human law." Admiral Sarah strode down the shuttle's ramp, and every being in the docking bay took an involuntary step backward. She wasn't particularly tall or physically imposing, but she carried herself with the authority of someone who commanded fleets and decided the fate of worlds. Her uniform was crisp, her bearing perfect, but there was something in her eyes that spoke of barely contained fury. This wasn't just an admiral collecting a prisoner. This was a mother confronting the being who had hurt her child. "Ma'am," saluted smartly, "the prisoner is secured and ready for transport." Sarah approached slowly, her gaze never leaving his compound eyes. When she spoke, her voice was quiet enough that the watching crowd had to strain to hear. "Officer, do you know why I brought 15 warships to collect you?" The mandibles clicked nervously. To intimidate us." "No," Sarah replied. "I brought 15 warships because that's what it takes to send a message to every species in the galaxy. The message is simple. Human children are not acceptable targets for your prejudice, your anger, or your political grievances." She stepped closer and could see his own reflection in her eyes. "You will stand trial for assault on a human civilian. You will be judged by a jury of human peers, and whatever sentence they decide, you will serve in full. But before that happens, you're going to help me send another message." What message?" Sarah's smile was as cold as space between the stars. "That protect their young, always." The Marines escorted up the shuttle's ramp, and Sarah followed. As the craft lifted off and returned to the Retribution, the watching crowd remained silent. They had just witnessed something that would be remembered for generations. The moment the galaxy learned that human children were under the protection of the deadliest military force known to civilized space. On the Retribution's bridge, Sarah took her command position and opened a channel to the security checkpoint where her family waited. "David, is Maya okay?" "She's going to be fine," her husband's voice replied. "The doctors say no permanent damage. She wants to know if she can see the ships." Despite everything, Sarah found herself smiling for the first time since the crisis began. "Tell her mommy will give her a full tour when this is over." And David. "Yes. Bring her home." As the Terran fleet maintained its vigil around Station Nexus 7, word of the incident spread through hyperspace communication networks at the speed of light. On 100 worlds, alien governments received urgent reports about the human response to an attack on their young. The galaxy was learning a lesson it should have already known. There was no force in the universe more dangerous than human parents protecting their children. 48 hours after the incident at Station Nexus 7, the ripple effects of Admiral's response were being felt across the entire galaxy. In the Galactic Hegemony Council chambers on Prime, representatives from 53 species engaged in the most heated debate the Assembly had seen in decades. The massive circular chamber buzzed with translation devices as beings of every conceivable form argued over humanity's actions. Holographic displays showed footage of the human fleet surrounding Station Nexus 7, recorded by dozens of witnesses and broadcast across every major news network. Ambassador of the Confederacy rose from her crystalline speaking platform, her 6 arms gesturing emphatically as she addressed the Assembly. "This is unprecedented. A human fleet threatened a neutral station over a minor incident involving a single child." A rumble of agreement echoed from several delegations, but it was quickly countered by other voices. Ambassador, Terra's representative to the Hegemony Council, remained seated, his expression calm as chaos swirled around him. "Minor incident?" The voice belonged to Ambassador Tar of the Union, whose own species had learned to respect human determination through bitter experience. "A hegemony officer struck an 8-year-old civilian. If this is what you consider minor, perhaps we need to what constitutes civilized behavior." The chamber erupted again, but the real debate was happening in smaller gatherings throughout hegemony space. In military academies, tactical instructors were analyzing the human fleet's response with growing appreciation for its precision and overwhelming force projection. On the military academy world of 438b, cadets studied holographic displays showing the Terran Fifth Fleet's formation around Nexus 7. The young was part of an advanced tactics course taught by Commander, a veteran who had fought against human forces during the border conflicts. "Note the positioning," Commander explained, pointing to the tactical display. Admiral didn't just surround the station, she created a formation that could respond to any threat while maintaining clear escape routes for civilian traffic. This wasn't random aggression. This was calculated protection. Another cadet raised a tentacled appendage. But sir, wasn't the response excessive? 15 warships for one officer. His features shifted into what might have been amusement. Cadet, you're thinking like a military strategist, not like a human parent. Admiral wasn't just collecting a criminal, she was sending a message to every species in the galaxy. The message was simple: harm a human child, and you will face the full might of the Terran Defense Corps. He manipulated the hologram to show news reports streaming in from across known space. Look at the response. In the 48 hours since this incident, reported crimes against human civilians have dropped by 93%. Stations that previously tolerated anti-human discrimination are implementing new protection policies. The message was received. Meanwhile, on Earth itself, the incident had become a rallying cry for humanity's expanding presence in galactic affairs. In the halls of the Terran Senate, representatives who had previously advocated for cautious diplomacy were now calling for stronger protection of human civilians throughout the galaxy. Senator Maria Santos stood before the Defense Committee, her voice carrying the weight of a species that had grown tired of being seen as second-class citizens among the stars. We have tried accommodation. We have tried understanding. We have bent over backward to prove that humans can be civilized members of the galactic community, she declared, her words being broadcast live across the Sol system. But when a hegemony officer can strike an 8-year-old human child with impunity, perhaps it's time to remind the galaxy why we're called. The committee chamber erupted in applause, but not everyone was pleased with humanity's new assertiveness. In the shadowy corridors of power on a dozen worlds, alien leaders gathered to discuss what they saw as humanity's growing militaristic tendencies. On Prime, the High Command convened in emergency session. The attack on the human child had been committed by one of their own officers, and the political ramifications were severe. General, no relation to the disgraced officer but carrying the same clan name, stood before an assembly of his people's highest military leaders. Our intelligence reports indicate that human fleet movements have increased by 40% in the past 2 days, he reported grimly. They're not mobilizing for invasion. They're repositioning to better protect their civilian populations throughout hegemony space. High Commander Kith's exoskeleton clicked with agitation. This cannot stand. We cannot allow these to intimidate the entire galaxy because one officer made a minor error in judgment. Minor error? The voice belonged to Intelligence Director, whose own research into human psychology had made her one of the few to truly understand their former enemies. Commander, that officer didn't just strike a child. He struck the daughter of Admiral Sarah, one of Terra's most decorated military leaders. He might as well have declared war. She activated a holographic display showing human military doctrine and historical precedents. Humans have a saying, it takes a village to raise a child. What this means in practical terms is that every human considers themselves responsible for the protection of all human children. When you attack one, you attack them all. The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. Furthermore, continued, our psychological profiles indicate that humans form extremely strong protective bonds with their offspring. This isn't cultural, it's biological. They literally cannot help themselves when their young are threatened. Back on Station Nexus 7, life was slowly returning to normal, but the changes were obvious to anyone who looked closely. Human families moved through the corridors with noticeably more confidence, while alien security personnel were conspicuously more polite in their interactions. In the medical bay, Maya was completing her final examination before being cleared for travel. Dr. Sayre, the station's chief medical officer, was a skilled physician who had treated thousands of different species over her long career. The swelling has completely subsided, she reported to David and Sarah, who had arrived on the station 12 hours earlier. There should be no lasting effects from the injury. Maya sat on the examination table, swinging her legs and looking much more like the happy 8-year-old she should be. The past 2 days had been difficult. She had experienced her first real encounter with prejudice and violence, but she had also seen the galaxy rally to protect her. Dr. Sayre, Maya asked with the directness that only children possess, why did that man hit me? Was it because I'm human? The doctor's gill slits fluttered with emotion. "Child, some beings in the galaxy make very bad choices, but look what happened when you were hurt. Beings from dozens of species came to help you. That man was wrong, and everyone knows it now." Sarah watched her daughter process this information with the resilience that never failed to amaze her. Maya had inherited the best qualities of both her parents, David's calm strength and Sarah's unwavering determination. "Mommy," Maya said suddenly, "can I see your ships, the ones that came to help me?" Sarah smiled, the first genuinely happy expression she had worn since the crisis began. "Of course, sweetheart. Would you like to see the Bridge of the Retribution?" "Can I sit in the captain's chair?" "Admiral's chair," Sarah corrected gently, "and yes, you can." As the family prepared to leave the medical bay, word came through official channels that Officer had been transported to Earth for trial under Terran law. The Hegemony Council had agreed to the arrangement after intense negotiations, understanding that the alternative might be far worse for galactic stability. But the real impact of the incident was being felt in ways that couldn't be measured by diplomatic agreements or legal proceedings. Throughout the galaxy, human children were walking a little taller, while alien bullies were thinking twice before targeting them. On the mining world of 442B, 10-year-old Tommy Harrison was returning from school when a group of Orion adolescents who had previously tormented him suddenly found other things to do. Word of what had happened at Nexus 7 had spread even to this remote outpost. On the trade hub of New Geneva, human merchant families who had endured years of discrimination suddenly found themselves being treated with a respect that bordered on deference. On 100 worlds throughout hegemony space, the message was the same. Human children were no longer acceptable targets. The price of harming them had been demonstrated for all to see. As Admiral's fleet prepared to depart Station Nexus 7, she stood on her bridge one final time looking down at the station that had become the center of galactic attention. "Admiral," her communications officer reported, "we're receiving a message from Terran Command. Orders for our next patrol assignment." "Very well, plot a course for the Rigel system. I understand there are some human colonies there that could use a friendly visit." The Terran Fifth Fleet departed Station Nexus 7 in perfect formation, leaving behind a galaxy that had learned an important lesson about the consequences of threatening human children. 3 months after the Nexus 7 incident, as it came to be known in galactic history books, the trial of Officer began on Earth in the International Criminal Court in Geneva. The proceedings were broadcast live across the galaxy, watched by billions of beings who wanted to see how humans dispensed justice. The courthouse was a study in contrasts, ancient human architecture housing the most advanced translation technology available, allowing for seamless communication between species. Judge Williams, a veteran of interstellar law with 20 years of experience in human-alien legal proceedings, presided over a case that would set precedents for centuries to come. Sat in a specially designed containment unit that accommodated his physiology while ensuring security. His court-appointed defense attorney, Dr., was one of Terra's most respected legal experts, committed to ensuring a fair trial even for someone who had committed such a heinous act. The prosecution was led by District Attorney Jennifer, whose opening statement would be remembered as one of the most powerful speeches in interstellar legal history. "Ladies and of the jury," she began, addressing the 12 human citizens who would determine's fate. "We are here today not because of politics, not because of species rivalry, but because an adult being chose to strike a defenseless child. The fact that the child was human and the perpetrator was alien is irrelevant. What matters is that innocence was attacked, and justice must be served." The prosecution's case was overwhelming. Video evidence from multiple angles showed the incident clearly. Witness testimony from beings of 7 different species all corroborated the same facts. Had struck Maya without provocation, using enough force to potentially cause serious injury. But the defense strategy surprised many observers. Doctor didn't deny the facts. Instead, he attempted to place them in context. "Your Honor," he argued during his opening statement, "while we do not condone officers' actions, we must understand the pressures that led to this moment. The species has suffered significant territorial and economic losses following their conflict with humanity. Officer was dealing with trauma, grief, and a sense of displacement that clouded his judgment." Judge Williams listened carefully to both sides, but her instructions to the jury were clear. You are not here to judge the politics between species. You are here to determine whether the defendant committed assault against a minor human civilian. The evidence will speak for itself. The trial lasted 2 weeks, during which time the galactic community watched humanity's justice system at work. Many alien observers were surprised by the thoroughness of the proceedings, the respect shown to the defendant's rights, and the careful deliberation of the jury. Maya herself, now 9 years old and remarkably composed as she described the incident. Her testimony was brief but powerful, delivered with the straightforward honesty that only children possess. He hit me really hard, she said simply. I was scared because he was so big and I didn't understand why he was angry at me. I wasn't doing anything wrong. When asked by the defense attorney if she understood that the defendant was sorry for his actions, Maya considered the question seriously before answering. Daddy says that being sorry means you try to make things better, but he hasn't tried to make anything better. He just keeps saying it wasn't his fault. The jury deliberated for 3 days before returning their verdict: guilty of assault in the 3rd degree against a minor civilian. The sentence was 2 years in a minimum security facility with mandatory psychological counseling and community service working with human-alien reconciliation programs. Many in the galactic community were surprised by the relatively moderate sentence, but Judge Williams explained her reasoning during the sentencing hearing. Mister, she addressed the defendant directly, you committed a serious crime against a child. However, this court recognizes that you are not acting from pure malice, but from prejudice and trauma that could potentially be addressed. Your sentence reflects both the need for justice and the possibility of redemption. But the real impact of the trial wasn't the punishment. It was the message it sent throughout the galaxy. Humans could be fierce protectors of their young, but they were also committed to justice rather than revenge. 6 months after the trial, the effects of the Nexus 7 incident were still reverberating through galactic society. The Children's Protection Act had been passed by the Hegemony Council, establishing clear protocols for the treatment of all species youth in neutral territory. The act was largely seen as a response to human concerns, but it protected children of every species. On Station Nexus 7, Administrator had implemented the most comprehensive anti-discrimination policies in hegemony space. The station had become a model for peaceful cooperation, with human families feeling genuinely welcome for the first time. Maya, now a celebrity throughout human space whether she wanted to be or not, had returned to her normal life as much as possible. She attended school on Terra Nova, played with her friends, and occasionally answered letters from human children across the galaxy who saw her as a hero. One such letter came from Timothy, age 7, living on the mining colony of New Ceres. Dear Maya, it read in careful block letters, my mom says you're the reason why the mean aliens on our station don't bother us anymore. Thank you for being brave. Can you ask your mom to bring her ships to visit us sometime? Reading the letter in her family's quarters aboard the space station where her father was now stationed, Maya looked up at her parents with a serious expression. Mommy, are there other kids like me who get picked on because they're human? Sarah considered her words carefully. Her daughter had been thrust into the role of a symbol, representing humanity's determination to protect its children. But she was still just a 9-year-old girl who deserved to have a normal childhood. Sometimes, sweetheart, but that's why we have rules and laws to protect everyone, especially children. And that's why you have big ships. David laughed, pulling his daughter onto his lap. The ships are to keep everyone safe. But the most important protection comes from people caring about each other and standing up for what's right. Maya nodded solemnly, already understanding more about galactic politics than most adults. She had experienced firsthand both the ugliness of prejudice and the power of justice. Meanwhile, across the galaxy, the precedent set by Admiral's response was changing the calculus for anyone who might consider targeting human civilians. In the Hegemony Intelligence Service's annual threat assessment, a new section had been added titled Consequences of Actions Against Human Noncombatants. The report was blunt in its conclusions. Human military response to attacks on their civilian population, particularly children, can be expected to be swift, overwhelming, and decisive. Political considerations appear to be secondary to protective instincts. recommend against any actions that could be interpreted as threatening to human families. But perhaps the most significant change was happening at the individual level, in the millions of small interactions between humans and aliens throughout the galaxy. The respect that humans had demanded through strength was gradually evolving into genuine understanding. On the diplomatic world of Prime, Ambassador received a delegation of representatives led by General, who had been appointed to improve relations between their species and humanity. Ambassador, the General began, my people have spent considerable time studying the events at Nexus 7. We believe we understand now what we failed to appreciate before. And what is that, General? Humans don't fight for territory or resources or glory. You fight for each other, for your families. This makes you far more dangerous than any species that fights for conquest because your motivation is absolute. Nodded slowly. General, we've never wanted to be your enemies, but we will always protect our own. We understand that now. Perhaps it's time our species learned to be friends rather than merely avoiding being enemies. A year after the incident, Officer was released from prison having completed his sentence and psychological treatment. He had spent months working with human-alien reconciliation programs, learning about human culture and psychology. His first public statement after release was a formal apology broadcast across space. I let fear and prejudice guide my actions, he said, standing before cameras that would carry his words to billions. I harmed a child because I saw her as something other than what she truly was, an innocent being who deserved protection, not violence. I cannot undo what I did, but I can spend the rest of my life working to ensure it never happens again. He had volunteered to work with youth programs, using his experience as a cautionary tale about the dangers of prejudice. It was a form of redemption that many found surprising, but it demonstrated the potential for growth and change that existed even in the darkest circumstances. Maya, now 10 years old, occasionally thought about the alien who had hit her. She had learned about his release and his apology, and with the wisdom that children sometimes possess, she had written him a letter. Dear Mister, it began, I hope you learned that hitting kids is wrong. I forgive you because my mom and dad taught me that forgiveness is how we make the world better. I hope you can help other kids now. When received the letter, he wept, a response that his species was not known for, but which had become more common as he learned to process emotions that his military training had suppressed. The Nexus 7 incident had ended not with conquest or domination, but with justice, growth, and the possibility of redemption. It had shown the galaxy that humans were indeed, but they were with hearts, principles, and the capacity for mercy. Most importantly, it had established a truth that would protect human children throughout the galaxy for generations to come. Harm a human child, and you will face the consequences. But show respect, seek justice, and work toward reconciliation, and you will find humans to be the most loyal allies in the galaxy. The message had been delivered, understood, and accepted. And Maya could grow up in a galaxy where being human was no longer seen as a weakness to be exploited, but as an identity to be respected. They had shown their strength, now they had shown their wisdom. The galaxy was learning that both were equally formidable. The message had been delivered, received, and understood. Human families throughout the galaxy could rest a little easier, knowing that they were watching over their own. And Officer was about to become the example that ensured no one ever forgot it. And for Officer, who had let prejudice guide his actions, 4 minutes felt like a lifetime. It was already too late. He had awakened something that the galaxy had hoped would remain sleeping. The humans were coming, and they were very, very angry.